Hello and welcome to Hoax or Holy Grail. Today we're looking at Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, also known as HPB or Madame Blavatsky. She was a woman of mystery, controversy, and much speculation. Sources vary on whether she was born into wealth or not. And of course, there's the question of, was she a wise woman or was she simply a very good, skilled con artist? Her life is fascinating and quite interesting, even without some of the made up and over the top stories about her. She was married young, traveled extensively. In her 40s, she began the Theosophical Society, which is still in existence today, and her published works are Isis Unveiled, The Secret Doctrine, The Voice of Silence, and Key to Theosophy, which are all still available and being published today, which says a lot about the work that she produced. She was born in Russia in 1931, and sources vary about her social status. So whether her family had connections to royalty or not, but all the sources do agree that her father was in the military and they moved around quite a bit because of that. The sources also agree that she was married at 17 to a 40-year-old plus friend of the family, but she ran away shortly after, a few months after the wedding actually. The sources also vary about whether she had 1, 2, or 3 husbands throughout her lifetime, but what they do all agree on is that she continued with her first husband's name, which was Blavatsky. There were extensive travels throughout her life, both while she was younger and after she had begun the Theosophical Society. There are a number of questions about whether she was poor throughout the majority of her life, or whether during certainly her early travels her father was sending her money to support her. Other sources suggest that she was taking various jobs that she could find throughout her travels to support herself. The mystery years, because according to the different sources I referred to, some of it cannot be verified. Also, how she managed to afford traveling to all these different countries. Her talks about masters Moria and Kuthumi, who lived in Tibet, and according to Madame Blavatsky, these are the two, I guess ascended beings would be the proper term, that she channeled information from. So she wasn't saying that this was her information, it was information that she received from these beings. And they also talk about the 3 years of training that it took for her to become skilled at this type of communication. I'm mentioning the 3 years of training because now and for several decades, there are weekend workshops, there are expensive 1 to 2 week seminars that you can take where people are saying you can get all these different skills, but the reality is it takes much more than a weekend or just a few weeks to attain some of these different skills. So I do want to point out that in her case, she did mention it was 3 years of training. It wasn't all 3 years in a row. She took some training and then went back for the next part, which does make sense actually, because it would give her a chance to develop some things before going on to more information. The sources also all agree that it was 1873 when she arrived in New York City. At that time, of course, spiritualism was the big thing. And in 1875, she began the Theosophical Society with Henry Steele Alcott and W.Q. Judge, two men that she had met as she was exploring spiritualism and going to various workshops and things herself. So spiritualism was the big thing during this time period. I've talked in depth about that in the Fox Sisters episode. The premise to spiritualism is that in a trance, so people referred to as mediums, could communicate with humans who had passed on, so their spirits, their souls. Madame Blavatsky's idea wasn't so much about talking to the human dead as it was speaking to higher beings, or as I say, ascended masters. So she was actually talking about something different than what spiritualism was about. However, for Madame Blavatsky, the issue was that people weren't really looking for spiritual teaching or something of that nature. They basically wanted entertainment and a show, which is what the mediums certainly put on for them, between musical instruments playing, ectoplasm appearing, table rapping. It was a performance, and that isn't what Madame Blavatsky was about. I put in here, it's much like the paranormal channels now, and long before 2024, the majority of them are entertainment only. Certainly, if you notice the number of things that occur in their so-called investigations, there are some who are attempting to do research and find answers and move that particular area of study forward, but the vast majority are simply entertainment, putting on a show for people. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you're aware that what you're watching is entertainment, not actual research looking for answers. So with Madame Blavatsky, she did have the Theosophical Society. Unfortunately, there were not many people who were getting on board with that or the concepts. So she left for India in 1878. Sources vary on the reason for that. Some vary in the year that it occurred by 1 to 3 years. There are different speculations about whether it had to do with the publication of Isis Unveiled not being as well received as she had hoped. There's one source who had said there was an issue with D.D. Home. It's unknown, or I couldn't find whether she had actually met him or worked with him, as the one source implied. So there's a lot of different speculation about why she went to India. There she set up the Theosophical headquarters with Henry Steele Alcott, and those were set up at Adyar near Madras. And they remained there, where they were producing newsletters. She was continuing to work and develop her skills, as well as holding sessions for people who came to get information. During this time, she continued to travel, so she didn't just stay in India. She was traveling through Europe and went to London, England as well, where she met members of the Society for Psychical Research. They were interested in testing her because that's what they were into at that time period, looking into mediums as well as ghosts and other questionable activities. She agreed to be tested, but not in London, England. She said that she would agree to be tested in India at her own place. The SPR sent Richard Hodgson to do the testing in 1885. When he arrived, however, Madame Blavatsky wasn't there. She was traveling elsewhere. So he spoke with the people who worked at her center. They said that the letters she claimed to be written or channeled by Master Moria and Kuthumi were not actually channeled work. It was just Madame Blavatsky writing things. The letters were tested by handwriting experts, both in India and later in England. And it was determined that the handwriting was in fact Madame Blavatsky's, which kind of makes sense, as she was saying she was channeling the work, not that these souls were writing the information. In any case, the report by Hodgson claimed that she was a fraud. It's interesting to note that the location burnt down shortly after the investigation was completed, and I didn't find any further information about whether it was considered to be arson. Some said that it was to destroy any type of evidence in terms of slots leading from one room to the other, which is where there was the assumption that she was sending, or her servants were sending the letters through during a reading. Madame Blavatsky left India permanently not long after the scathing report came out, but she did continue to travel in Europe. She continued to be popular and have followers, and her last years were spent in London, England. She died May the 8th, 1891, from influenza in her home. There was also, during the final years of her life, her health, it didn't really say specifically what the issues were, but her health was not good even prior to influenza. Now, over a century later, the SPR has changed their decision about Madame Blavatsky, although they haven't said, at least from what I've read thus far, that she was legitimate or, supported what she was doing. The society has said that Hodgson's results were biased and that she was unjustly condemned. So I'm not sure why they turned that around or what it was based on, because as I say, they did check the handwriting. He had spoken with people who worked with and for Madame Blavatsky. I'm not sure if some of those people were paid for the information, so maybe it was questionable about whether what they were saying was motivated by money more than motivated by providing the truth. Her published work, so Isis Unveiled, was published in 1877 while she was still in New York. And that work is about a mystical experience being the way to attain true spiritual insight. So she has commentaries about the religion of the time as well as science. There's various speculation about whether the work is actually hers or written by someone else. As I say, she was a woman of controversy. The next published book that she had is The Secret Doctrine. That was in 1888. She spent a number of years working on that throughout her travels. It was 1,300 handwritten pages, which is huge, and I'm sure hard to wrap your mind around for people who are used to dictating or typing work versus actually handwriting materials. That's a massive volume of work. There is now an abridged version, 250 pages long. I'm not sure how much of that would still contain, I guess, the gist of what she was trying to say, but that's quite a condensed version of what she had. I also believe that's in 2 volumes from what I had noticed when I was looking some of that up. The material is about the origins of man, the universe, reincarnation, And she covers a wide range of other subjects in that as well, and that is a follow-up to Isis Unveiled. The Key to Theosophy, which she published in 1889, is the foundation of the Theosophical Society. Basically, the beliefs, the activities, the thoughts, the general layout of what that belief system is about and how to attain advancing and evolution personally. During her life, she also published a journal called The Theosophist, and she was the editor from 1879 to 1888. As I say, her works are still available. I noticed Amazon and a number of other sites that still have them. As far as her journal, and there is another one, I believe, you can find those as well by doing a Google search and certainly going to the Theosophical Society website. If you're interested in learning more about this fascinating woman, or the belief system that she began and that continues to be popular around the world, certainly check out those websites for more information. So her impact, it was more than just talking to the dead for Madame Blavatsky. It was about reaching your highest abilities, developing your own personal skills. So she wasn't really the bells and whistles spiritualism type performer. Maybe that's part of why she had met with so much resistance or found it challenging to build the society. People wanted more of a performance. She did develop the Theosophical Society's belief system, or in terms of pulling together a group of people, along with, of course, Henry Steele Olcott and W.Q. Judge. The society continues to exist to this day, which is quite a high compliment considering how long it has been in existence and how many other systems have come and gone during that time period. Also, because of her works and talks about reincarnation and karma and ascended masters and different beings, she also made it possible for Buddhism and Hinduism to be considered seriously throughout the Western world, which I believe is very important because, of course, the more that we talk to people who may have different beliefs from us, the more that we all get to grow and learn and develop and evolve together. Because personally, I'm not a one way is the right way. I am a what works for you is great. I'm not about trying to convince people what to believe or what not to believe. But I do think that open, honest, and mature conversations between people are very important because there is a lot of different things to consider as we move through our lives. Madame Blavatsky, I believe, is a role model regardless of what your thoughts of her are, because not only did she find her purpose after she was 40 years old, but she continued to live it up until her final days. Most people seem to think that if you're going to accomplish something, it has to be when you're young, and they get all stressed about that. But as Madame Blavatsky shows, you can be in your 40s when you figure things out. She continued to stick to what that purpose was. She believed in what she was doing. There are a lot of impacts that came from that, and here we are in 2024, and there are still so many people who know her name because of her work and the systems that she developed. She also, because she was 40 when she began this, had all that life experience behind her, and as I say, she traveled extensively. There were a number of different things that happened throughout her life, so she was able to bring all of that into her published work as well as her teachings. So whether you believe she was genuine or whether you think she was just a really good con artist, it doesn't change the fact that she's certainly had a major impact and continues to have an impact on the world now in 2024. The sources that I used to pull this information together, and there was so much more that I could have said about her, but as I say, if you're interested, you can look into these sources yourself or go to the Theosophical Society's website, or if there's a center near you, you could always either give them a call or go visit and talk to them. But the sources that I referred to are Dark Dimensions by Colin Wilson. There is an article there about Madame Blavatsky that's written by Christmas Humphreys. He is a member of the Theosophical Society, so of course his take is going to be a bit different than, say, a researcher who isn't involved with the society. So it's well worth the read. And I didn't find that he really had a biased opinion. He was simply sharing his thoughts and what he had learned about Madame Blavatsky. Ghost Hunters by Deborah Blum, I have to say, redeemed itself this time, because unlike with the Fox sisters, where some of the information was incorrect, this time it actually connected with what the other sources were saying with accurate dates. Whisperers, The Secret History of the Spirit World by J.H. Brennan, had a few little bits in it about Madame Blavatsky. A Brief Guide to Secret Religions by David V. Barrett. Fascinating read and had quite a bit of information, obviously, about the Theosophical Society. My Time Life series. So Psychic Voyages was one volume I referred to. The other was Ancient Wisdom and Secret Sex. Mysteries of Space, Time, and Mind, volumes 4 and 15, were also helpful sources of information. I did find it interesting that in the Mysteries, volume 4, some of the paragraphs were almost word for word from, I believe it was Psychic Voyages, that had been published prior to the Mystery series. So that was a bit bizarre, but yeah, the more you read, the more you notice and learn things. The websites that I referred to were Britannica Encyclopedia, BlavatskyArchives.com, LearnReligions.com, and Wikipedia. Although, and I've said it before, I don't really consider Wikipedia a very reliable research tool, I do have to say that for these last two episodes, the Fox sisters and this one, Madame Blavatsky, Wikipedia has coincided with other sources that I've referred to. So I do still take a look at it, and it is nice to know that the information is accurate. I still haven't changed my mind, because it does concern me when anyone can go in and change things and you consider all the different pages, and some people just sadly have too much time on their hands. But in any case, I do recommend checking out those websites, whether you're interested in learning more about Madame Blavatsky or other topics. They were very helpful and useful to use. I hope that you found this episode to be of interest or benefit. If so, please remember to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below, as both of those things certainly help get my channel out to more people who may be interested in the content that I produce. As always, I thank you for the gift of your time, and until next time, take good care.